I wanted to welcome everybody once again to another session of the WBL Institute. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I see folks are sending good wishes in the chat, so we appreciate you guys. And we just once again thank everybody who's here. We appreciate that you're spending time with us. This is the second to last session for the quarter. So we are definitely excited to have continued attendance from some familiar faces today. Today's topic is multilingualism and multiculturalism in the workplace, a very important and very timely topic. So we're really excited to have DIML and our usual DIML representative, Jasenia Crespo, with us today. And so you are in the right place if you are hoping to get more information on this topic. So moving to the next slide, just want to again remind folks that you are here through this particular landing page for the Institute. This is the way through the calendar. So for those of you who have been coming consistently, you guys know you go through, you click on the actual session that you want to register for, and then you will be taken to Eventbrite. That's not going to change for Q4, and we will be unveiling the new calendar hopefully before the end of this week. So you'll be able to go ahead and sign up for sessions in April, in May, and in June. So moving to the next slide. Once again, just to go over the meeting norms, we're hopeful that everyone who's here is going to participate. We know that there's still folks coming into the room. We hope that we will all be present. And that doesn't necessarily mean on camera, but it does mean speaking up in the chat. It means speaking up live and really engaging in the content. And then also we want you to take the exit survey before you leave. We do want to make sure and hear from you. We are going to be making tweaks to the content for the next quarter, and your feedback is definitely going to be very critical to make sure that we continue to have consistent quality, but also to make sure that you're getting what you need from these sessions. So moving right along to the next slide. We have a huge lineup today in terms of folks who are represented. Myself and Larry Fleming Williams are here under the CTE team. We have Jasenia Crespo under DML, the Division of Multilingual Learners. We also have representation from Bronx International High School through their WBL coordinator, Damaris Mercado. And then we also have Julia Lynn Productions, Inc. representation from Laverne Bowen. So we look forward to hearing from everyone today, and I will pass the mic over to Jasenia.
Thank you. I'm really excited about today's session, and I'm just going to jump right in because we have a lot to cover. So our outcomes for today is participants will be able to understand the multilingualism and multiculturalism landscape, learn best practices and strategies for supporting your multilingual learners and English language learners, and employer partners in uplifting multilingualism and multiculturalism as an asset in the workplace. Before we jump into content, we would love to know who's in the room. So if you can put your name, your school, your role, the office that you're with, if you're from a central team, and what are you hoping to learn from today's session? So I'm going to pause there for 1 second to give folks some time to just put in some responses. What are you hoping to learn from today's session? Okay, I'm seeing some responses in the chat now. Okay, thank you. How to better serve all students. This is anyone else before moving on? Hoping to learn how to assist all students. How to be more inclusive. All right, incorporating males into the industry. This is great. Hopefully we'll be able to answer all of these questions during today's session. And if not, I just want to remind folks that as part of the exit survey, you can request a consultation, which I will be starting to follow up with folks who have completed the exit survey and have requested some follow-up. So I will be doing more one-on-one with folks who are interested in exploring this topic of supporting ELs in CTE programs and in work-based learning. So on to the next slide. Again, just reminding folks of who we are as a division of multilingual learners. Our vision is that all New York City DOE's culturally and linguistically diverse students will graduate multilingual, multiliterate, and prepared to succeed in college, career, and life in a global society. We intend to achieve this through our 4 strategic focus areas that include college and career readiness for every multilingual learner and English language learner, rigorous instruction across disciplines for multilingual learner and English language learners, a coherent system-wide process for supporting L program design and implementation, and increased family empowerment and community partnerships. And specifically, I want to just highlight that little green square, which is the college and career readiness for every MEL and L, which is literally the team that I am a part of. I serve as the director of career readiness, and I am solely charged with supporting career readiness for English language learners across our system, with a focus of increasing L's access to and completion of CTE courses and work-based learning. So feel free to, again, complete that exit survey. Hit me up anytime you need something. I am here for you. And my main job is to help really support schools with resource development, partnership development, and some capacity building. So please take advantage of the opportunities that the CTE team has laid out in terms of engaging with the Division of Multilingual Learners. So also just, just wanting to dive really quickly into some data, just so that we understand the landscape, again, of multiculturalism and multilingualism in the workplace, and bringing it home and center to who we are and where we are right now. So 4 out of 10 New York City DOE students have a home language other than English. So many of our students are multilingual and multicultural. And I want you to think, as we're going through today's content, it's not only your English language learners who are your multicultural and multilingual students, but really wanting to uplift that your general population students are also maybe multilingual and also definitely multicultural, and also your students with IEPs. So the strategies and the practices that we're going to be engaging in today will benefit all your students, right? So not just your English language learners, but all of your students, and celebrate the beauty and the gifts that they're speaking another language and also being multicultural brings to the table. And specifically, thinking about 4 out of 10 New York City DOE students, that's 400,000 multilingual learners, right? That's 40% of students. And some of the top languages include Spanish, Chinese, Bengali, and Arabic. And of course, we know this is going to vary by district and by school, but it's really important to remember that New York City represents over 100 languages. And within that, we have a vast range of different cultures and experiences that our students and families come to the table with. So let's hold that as we engage in today's session and think about some of these strategies. Also thinking about, of the 40%, 26.85% of that 40% are high school students who are English language learners. So that is a very large population of English language learners at the high school level that exists in our system. So thinking about how are we engaging and supporting our students through this process. I will not go into the definition of what an L is, but I put it there in case folks want to reference it, and you can have it after in case you want to share it with other team members at your school community or even employer partners, right? So there's an increased need for multilingualism in the country, and yet as an educational system, we still struggle to celebrate multilingualism and heavily promote English-only programs, right? And I was having a conversation the other day with a colleague who said, in the K through 12 system, and he said, we don't really celebrate multilingualism as an asset until we're in the workplace and we realize, oh yeah, the benefits of speaking another language are tremendous, right? So as a country, we will continue to see shifts in the number of people who speak or need language supports in another language, evidence shows that the demand will continue to increase over the next 5 years or even 10 years, with 1 out of 10 US employers who see the growing demand for multilingual employees, and with 1/3, 32%, reporting high dependency. So how are we, again, preparing our students to have these conversations with articulating these things and celebrating the multilingualism as an asset? And right now, employers are reporting that their greatest shortage among some of the highest languages here represented. So thinking about, I see Spanish represented here as one of the top, Chinese, French. Some of these languages are also some of the top languages spoken within our system. So how are we reinforcing this information to students and families on a regular basis through our work-based learning experiences and our CTE programming? And then at the end of the day, foreign language skills impact the bottom line. So, I think we all know this. It allows folks to think about more creatively, with intuitiveness, right? And then also thinking about the more languages you speak, the more impact you have on a market, right? And these are some of the sectors these are some of the sectors that I want to just highlight that really use language skills. And some of those are translation and interpretation services, employer response engineering, healthcare, law enforcement, business, finance, tourism, hospitality, sports, and agriculture. So I would love to encourage you, as you're listening throughout the presentation, and that you hold on to this, but love to hear, you are all experts in the room as well. How do you currently highlight the benefits of multilingualism to your students or employer partners? How are you celebrating this in working with your students? And if you can drop that information into the chat and hold on to that question as we're engaging in this. I also recommend taking notes if you haven't started to already, just because we are going to leverage those notes in our breakout session, as our breakout session will really consist of a working session where we want to hear from you as experts, not only on strategies that are being used, but gaps that exist and how can we fulfill those gaps, right? So thank you. I definitely saw putting it on your resume and cover letter. That's great. Thank you. I continue to ask folks to please drop into the chat how they highlight the benefits of multilingualism to students or employer partners. And we'll talk definitely today about additional strategies, but just to get your brain working, right? And then thinking about the benefits of hiring multiculturalism in the workplace. We all know that once a workplace is more diverse, that we see greater impact. However, if we all know this, but yet in practice, our workplaces don't look like that. So how can we ensure that we're sharing this information and preparing our students and our employers with this, right? So how do you currently communicate? And you can drop this into the chat or hold on to this question, right? How do you currently communicate the benefits of being multicultural, so working with diverse groups of people, to your students and to employers, right? And we're gonna talk more about this throughout the day, but just a question for you to hold on to. And if you're using strategies, drop them in the chat, because we're all experts in the room and we can create a community of learning. Some of the high level kind of benefits of multiculturalism in the workplace are more ideas, innovation, and creativity. It builds respect amongst employees and allows for diverse cultures, increasing the understanding of others, improves customer service, increased sales, and diversifies markets. And then valuing diversity cuts costs and reduces employee turnover and absenteeism, because they feel valued and want to be present, right? So again, think about some of these things, and you'll have, again, all this information and all the graphics, some articles there that you can look into a little bit more, and you can actually leverage and support during and utilize it throughout your work-based learning experiences or even in your CTE coursework. So we're going to jump into strategies to supporting your multilingual learners in uplifting their multilingualism and multiculturalism as an asset in the workplace. And I have the privilege and the honor of brainstorming with Damaris some of these strategies and like what are some strategies that we really want to uplift to the field. So just know that represented here is a collaborative effort that her and I have put together, and we'll talk a little bit more about what this looks like in practice, both based on her experience and my experience. However, I also would encourage you to, if you have ideas, you can throw them into the chat or take copious notes because we will reference them. So, strategies to uplifting multilingualism and multiculturalism. So exposing multilingual learners and English language learners to racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse professionals via career days, panels, mentoring, or other work-based learning experiences. Damaris, if you have an example that you can share, I would love to be able to hear that from you.
Hello, everyone. So what I do is I try and find as many programs as possible so that I am able to offer as many different opportunities in different fields. I also try and reach out to the programs and ask them how can they support our kids. That way I know which students to recommend. So for example, I have EVC, which is a documentary internship that I work with. They have been very receptive in working with our students who are still a little shy to speak in front of a group, and they help support them, and they make sure that they place them in a group with other students that speak the same language. That way the students aren't as intimidated and they'll share more. So I definitely start trying by finding as many different opportunities and also reaching out to the programs and seeing how they're willing to help support our kids. That way the kids feel successful when they finish. And yep.
Thank you. And for me, something that many of you may have known about, but if not, I'm going to share. In February, during Career Exploration Month, the Division of Multilingual Learners hosted a series of career panels and workshop series. And the career panels centered Black and Brown professionals. And it was really important for the students to see people who look like them in order to be able to see the endless possibilities that exist for them. And sometimes we may not realize the importance of this, but it's really important, right? I'm thinking about exposing our students to the vast majority of these things. And we held the session, not only that centered Black and Brown folks, but we also did them in multiple languages. And we partnered with a couple of variety of different organizations to get professionals who spoke Haitian Creole, Spanish, Arabic. And we definitely presented those opportunities to our youth, in addition to having an English session. The one thing that I would also encourage folks to really think about, thinking about what is racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse professionals and exposing students to, is sometimes just asking the questions and the right questions, which we'll talk a little bit more later on, but asking the right questions to your employer partners to really encourage them to be able to bring to light some of these professionals who you may not even realize work in their organization. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but definitely wanted to highlight that as some best practices. And with that, definitely creating opportunities for multilingual learners and English language learners to explore various careers within your sector that leverage and benefit from speaking multiple languages, right? And I think, Damaris, you talked about how you've done that, including through workplace challenges, right?
Yes. So like I said before, right? We want the kids to have as much exposure as possible and also be successful. So we want to set them up for success. So we do try and find programs that will help support them, will celebrate the fact that they are multilingual. And, it's just a matter of speaking to them and asking these questions because they're out there and people want to pay back to their community. So they are willing to offer their expertise and willing to accommodate us as much as possible because they want to include more students and a more diverse population.
Thank you. And in terms of supporting multilingual learners, and we saw it into the chat earlier, but supporting multilingual learners highlight their language skills and abilities to work with diverse population on their resume and in workshops. I mean, somebody mentioned that as well. I know you do this work too. Like, what does that look like?
So yeah, I need to change the student's mindset, right? Because they come in and they feel less than, right? They're very insecure, their language, their accents, so they tend to hold back. And they also are very intimidated because they have to translate. And when you and I spoke about this before, I teach the kids that their brains are working like a computer, right? First, they're taking in what you're telling them. They have to translate it. Then they have to think of their response. Then they're translating that. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you dropped me in France in 6 months, I wouldn't be able to present or do what they're doing. So we have to start teaching the kids that there's a value to what they do and that they actually are doing what many of us couldn't do, right? So they are performing, and they do, once they have that confidence, they do want to succeed, and they go above and beyond. They're really hungry. They want the opportunity.
And you mentioned that one of the first things that you do with your students when you have them develop their resume is in the skills section, you have them include that they're multilingual. And then you have them include that they know how to work with diverse populations, right? Yes. So I think that is equally important to bring up, especially I'm currently working with 3 interns, and when I was reviewing their resumes, they didn't even have their language skills listed, and their home language was Spanish. So sometimes we may think that students are thinking in this way, and they may not be. So it's really great to like really uplift some of those things. And here we have our resources. And again, there's like embedded resources throughout on ways to implement some of these things and like some tools that you can reference. But specifically, we created a career exploration workbook that is translated in all 9 DOE languages. And it really highlights kind of the resume skills and like the importance of that. I just want to uplift that in this space. And then also linked, which you'll have it. We did a workshop in February, and we focused a lot on like highlighting language, because for us, it's just as important for students to value, just as they want to value learning English, we want them to continue practicing and valuing their home language. And it shouldn't be an either or, but it should be a yes and, right? So like a lot of times when our students come to this country, just the way our K through 12 system is set up, they're working on practice and learning English. But what tends to happen, and again, from personal experience, I know this, like folks tend to lose their home language. And it's like being able to create spaces where students are being able to do both is so important, right? And thinking about like not only giving them the practice and putting it on paper, but like how do you then prepare your students to articulate the benefits of being multilingual and multiculturalism as they're preparing for interviews or while they're in an interview?
Yeah, so we talked about this. So I agree. The first 2 skills I have my students put on their resume is the fact that they are, bilingual, trilingual, or multilingual. That's the first thing. And then the second skill is that they're able to work with a diverse population. I also start teaching them when they go to interviews, what can they pose when they get stuck, right? So for example, if a question is asked of them and they are not sure how to respond, I teach them to say, can you ask that in a different manner? Or can you rephrase that? That there's nothing wrong with that there's nothing wrong with taking time, pausing and thinking about, because everyone should, before answering a question in an interview, you should stop, think of your answer. And so that it is okay to say, can I have a moment? I also teach them to, sometimes an interviewer will ask multiple questions in one shot. And at the ending of answering it, if you're afraid that you didn't answer all of the questions, you could ask, did I answer all of your questions? And that way they feel more comfortable. But it's also teaching them to give evidences of how, what programs they've done, or what projects they've worked on. Teaching them that there's a value for them, that there's a place for them. And they need to start learning that we need them in the workplace, right?
Yeah, definitely the value they bring. And also thinking about, and somebody dropped this into the chat earlier, bringing diverse ways of completing a task, right? So like there's so many benefits of speaking another language, and being able to articulate the benefits in an interview is super powerful. And I would definitely, in practice, what I've seen work for me is giving our students the opportunity to work together during like mock interviews to prepare, because they're both learning to speak a different language, so learning to speak English, but also being able to leverage their home language at the same time. So really creating spaces where students are pairing together and doing those mock interviews before, engaging with an employer to do a mock interview, or before engaging or sending them off to conduct an interview. Really leveraging that, a space where students feel safe and are willing to take risks, I think is really important. And when we're thinking about creating additional opportunities for multilingual learners to articulate and practice their English and their home language, right? So thinking again, not either or thinking, but that yes and thinking. Skills during WBL and core academic or CTE courses. I know you mentioned to me before that you, in your classroom, you guys had this word wall. Can you talk a little bit more about like that strategy and what that looks like in practice?
So in one of our programs is the construction and historical preservation. So the typical word wall doesn't look the same in our classroom. It has the multilingual. So if there's a table song, it'll be in English, but then all of the other languages in our classroom are represented underneath it. That way the students are learning how to call the tools that and the equipment that they're working with in English and in their language, so that they're not losing, because they might not know what these tools are called in their native language. And that way they're learning the professional way of saying it in both their native language and in the English language. And again, with WBL activities, try and include as many programs, and there's so many of them willing to work with the kids, where they support the fact that they're learning English, and they give them as much help and scaffolding as they need. Because our students have a lot to bring to the table, right? Like you said, that diversity. If you start looking at all these websites, like I was teaching interview skills. So I had the kids Googling Apple and Googling different companies, large companies. And when you start looking in the about, so many of them talk about their diversity, how they're trying to bring more women into the workforce and more people of color. And now the kids are seeing, oh, wait, you need me, and I do have something to bring, because you're bringing a unique perspective, right? We know what a typical American wants and needs, but now what does everyone else know? Because now we're worldwide and we're working. So you're bringing in your perspective and you have something to bring. So it's just teaching, but finding those programs and not being afraid to ask for the help, ask for the support.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And not only thinking about what you mentioned about that wall, but also like being able to thinking about a construction worker or a banker or someone who, language skills are essential, and being able to talk and have the technical terms in both your home language and in your English language is so powerful. But it also allows other students in the space to also learn and value that multilingualism and multiculturalism is very important in the workplace, right? Especially when we think about the system, the K through 12 system, when aside from like bilingual programs, a lot of it is English only programs. So how, again, do we create spaces not only for our English language learners, but for all students, right? To be able to acknowledge the gifts and the beauty of speaking multiple languages. So with this, just thinking about one more thing, and then we'll move on to employer perspective. But thinking about building multilingual learners' confidence and awareness in speaking multiple languages and being multicultural by creating spaces to practice these skills. I know you mentioned before an opportunity that you did with a during a workplace challenge that allowed folks to talk in their home language, but also talk in English and work in groups. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I mentioned the program before, right? EVC. So they're a documentary. I had this one young lady who was very shy. She didn't feel comfortable speaking in English. I encouraged her to apply. I reached out to the director of the program and I said, please keep me informed of her progress because I'll support her whichever way, in however manner that she needs. They made sure they placed her in a group that had some Spanish-speaking students to support her. And they ended up doing a documentary on some struggles that Mexico was having. And so she was able to interview women in Mexico in the language. And then she came back and helped translate the interview that she was doing. So it empowered her. She felt like, oh, I'm actually carrying my weight, because for a while there, she felt like everyone else was contributing and she wasn't. So that ended up, that little confidence boost helped her continue with the program. And she, and the group members, really helped her along so that she wasn't as scared and she started learning to participate. And when she finished the program, she did the whole presentation in English because they had to present to the large group and they invited other people to come in, and she presented completely in English. And she was so proud of herself that she ended up applying to the New York Public Library Student Council, and she was accepted. So she got over her fear of speaking in front of large groups, and it built her confidence. So you definitely want, there's different ways for them that they are able to contribute. It's just a matter of us supporting them as they struggle through.
And I think that confidence and that is really important in being able to support students, and also like awareness, right? So I included here for folks, and I'm only uplifting just because of the conversation we're having, but I included some TED Talks that talk about like the power of multilingualism and speaking multiple languages. And the US is the only country that has a deficit thinking around multiple languages. So when you come here, let's say you immigrate here, it's like English only, English only, English, and we hammer that you must learn English, you must learn English. But there's so many other countries that really like embrace the idea and the beauty of speaking multiple languages and the power that has not only on the economy and on the global market, but just like, that idea of the diverse way of completing tasks, or the research that says that if you know another language, you're less likely to have dementia. Like there's so many benefits to the way the brain works when you're speaking multiple languages. And, unfortunately, our current system, the way it is structured, our students are not necessarily there's not enough safe spaces for them to practice both their language and their English, right? A lot of it is they're experiencing microaggressions or even bullying. And sometimes that creates negative spaces for them where they then decide to not engage at all. So again, thinking about how we are thinking about the strategies that we're using and we're creating to really uplift multilingualism and multiculturalism for all of our students, right? Like definitely for our Ls, but also thinking about the benefits that other folks kind of engage in, right? So the power of multilingualism. It's what we see right now, thinking about like bilingual programs that we see, is that it's not our families who the programs were designed for that are taking advantage of it. Instead, what we're seeing is that a lot of white affluent families are taking advantage of bilingual programs. So it's like they see the value in like the speaking multiple languages, but it's not something that we don't create a celebration or a way of really being able to uplift and see these things as gifts and beauty that's part of folks' identity. So in thinking about this presentation, these were some of the things that came to mind for me. It's like, how can we as a community and supporting English language learners, but also various students who are multilingual and multicultural, how can we create these safe spaces that really allow students to take risks, see the value in their own identities and that beauty and in their language skills, and continue to practice it, so that way when they get older, like me, that they don't lose some of their home language because they try to, whether it's assimilate or blend in or whatever the case is. How can we, through our practices and work-based learning experiences in our school-based structures, how can we create a different environment for our students? And with that, I'm going to transition into strategies to supporting employers in creating multilingual learner, English language learner, supporting employers in celebrating multilingualism and multiculturalism as an asset in the workplace. And if anyone on the call has questions that they want to bring up to Damaris, there will be a Q&A section, but you can write down your questions and also feel free to drop them into the chat. The same thing with Laverne, there will be a Q&A section. Laverne and I, again, work together to kind of think through some of these things. We're going to actually start by engaging in some questions and giving her an opportunity to talk through these questions. And then I created a summary of some of these practices and strategies, as well as other strategies that I have learned about. So I'm going to give her an opportunity to talk a little bit more about this. And then after this, we'll jump into breakouts, just so that way you can get some working and thinking through and brainstorming some of these ideas as I look at time. So with that, Laverne, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate you. What are some of the systems and structures you have in place to support students in uplifting their multilingualism and multiculturalism in the workplace?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again, Yesenia, for inviting me. My company, Julian Productions, Inc., is a holistic digital and media after-school program. And we have put into place systems in our community that involve our parents, that our young people who come through our program are very much supported by way of the arts and media. We've partnered with media, local cable companies. In my case, is BronxNet Television. We also have partnered with a number of community boards that give us support as far as our youth learning about our media segments. We put systems into place such as a curriculum, whereas our youth who come in, they are literally producers. They have topics that they choose, and in our case, we have all types of young people from different backgrounds. So they were, for example, we had a segment, a cultural segment, in which our young people who were from China had a whole segment on Chinese culture. Our young people who are from the Dominican Republic had a whole segment on the Dominican Republic. And when I mean segments, they literally do their research and they go forth in putting together Google Slides, and that's another system in place for us to utilize as a resource. They then get together as a team, and we have mashup segments that we produce onto BronxNet Television. Mashup in the sense of our Dominican young people have our Chinese young people, and they all have a wonderful segment about their cultures. So we reach out to a lot of different organizations in the community, and they also give us a great amounts of support in that aspects. But our parents, I must say, are our greatest resource. You're muted.
Yes, I was gonna say thank you. I appreciate that. And what I heard you say too is like through the programming, which we'll talk a little bit more about next, which is like what systems and projects have you created and activities, systems have you set up to support students with. What I already heard you say is like thinking about that Chinese culture, thinking about that Dominican culture, you're also increasing awareness, right? So because it's awareness of one another and opportunity for those students to engage together, but because it's going to be televised, it is awareness for others to also see. So it's going to be a living and breathing document that is created by that student in order to do that, right? And I know you work with, and I would love to talk a little bit about like what the activities and projects look like, and especially around, I know you worked with an English language learner who did not speak your language. So like, what did that like communication like look like? How did you guys facilitate talking if you guys didn't talk the same home language? Like how did you navigate that space in thinking about projects and activities that you guys were designing?
Yes, thank you for asking, because I, as an employer, really didn't know that I would have to deal with such different backgrounds. So we had a young lady who was placed with us who I didn't, she came to us as she's Chinese speaking, and she was very shy. But I believe that it was in the preparation of when she came to us, a particular company, Grant Associates. They let me know beforehand that she had issues at other workplaces, that it was too fast paced and it was too a little bit above her speed level in speaking. So when I knew that we were gaining someone who may need a little bit more special attention, and that actually helped me as an employer to look further into that. And of course, we're a media after school program, so we're visual. So that was our point of engagement with this young lady. And she just blossomed when that cultural segment that I talked about, she was able to go, she couldn't speak too much English. However, all I did was gave her the simple assignments of looking into her culture. What are some of the musics that she loves? Who are the top, she's a young lady who, teenage, what are some of the top pop groups in your country? What are some of the great commercials? And we went into advertising, which she just smashed. She got commercials that were from Adidas and from some of the top companies and let us know that she was able to even, and gain confidence to even prepare herself to apply to these companies. So she put together, and utilizing Google Slides, utilizing media tools that we are in partnership with now, I'm happy to say. And that helped her to gain a confidence, as Damaris indicated, because it was something familiar for her. It was her culture. And she was a young lady who never visited China. So it also gave her a confidence and pride in where she came from. And when we did the same, so she blossomed. Her segment was like so amazing. We also asked her about social media, and she helped us with social media and how different countries deal with social media, because once we knew that she was a little shy in this area, we were able to then purpose our curriculum towards her to compare others. And with our young Dominican individuals and with our Spanish speaking individuals, we asked them to do a lot of advertising research so that they could be prepared to know that there are workplaces out there that would engage them if they knew exactly how marketing and advertising work. So that helped this particular young lady so much. And I learned so much about China and about the practices, the holidays, and she just also, the last thing I'll say with that we also gave her an assignment to interview someone. So of course we were all sheltered in place. Now we're talking about COVID situation. We had to pivot to a digital situation because before we had a brick and mortar. She interviewed her grandma, and she learned so much about her grandma and the intergenerational cultural aspects about her culture. And then she was able to share that with us. So we then in turn asked one of the other young ladies who was Dominican to do the same. And she found her auntie who had a Dominican salon and small business. And so it excited her to know about her Dominican culture and the activities and the social aspects. And then they shared it. And when they shared it, that's when the real magic happened. And then I had to also fulfill a 30-minute segment. This is what we do. So I engaged a Ghanaian couple who I knew. And so these young ladies from Dominican Republic and a young lady from China interviewed the Ghanaian couple. So it was like a wonderful mashup. And we decided to keep that going forward because our young people are from different backgrounds, and it helps to prepare them for a diverse workplace in the future.
Thank you. And I also know that you had students like leverage their home language skills, right? So they did the interviews and they wrote it in their own home language, which I think is awesome. Yeah, right. So it's not only about thinking like, what are you writing and doing in English, but like, how can you insert your home language into this project? And what I really heard and things that stood out with me from like everything you just shared, it's like, I think a few things that have made you successful in being able to support English language learners is that you really value student voice and you include student voice in the projects that the students are creating. So it comes from them and they feel they feel valued and seen and heard, right, as individuals. But I also think it's the culture that you also have as an employer and that idea of fit and match, right? Because it doesn't necessarily always match. You said from the very beginning, like you knew this student needed additional attention and you adjusted your curriculum to be able to do that. There are some employers who may not be interested in that, and that's okay, right? And that's okay, but then you know that that's not a good fit for your students. So thinking about like all of these things is like great ideas to like think through and like, yeah, and ways to really support your else through these things. So I definitely heard like just you as an amazing employer and like being able to understand students need patience and like being able to create this culture. I also heard student voice and the importance of like student voice. I also heard the importance of knowing that student beforehand. And with that, I'll transition to get us to think like, so you knew that the student may have needed additional support. What other tips and tricks would have been helpful for you prior to working with this population? Like, what do you wish you would have known?
Absolutely. Actually, I think or dropped into the chat about when their resumes are presented to me, what languages they speak, what are their backgrounds, and so forth. So their resumes, and then also, well, in my case, I'm an after-school program. So I think another tip is just getting to know the parents as well, because sometimes the parents can, give you information that even the youngster may, not want to share, or you can help provide assistance with. So we provide a service, and we're a holistic media program, which means we deal with the whole person. And that helps our workplace because now we make space for that in our workplace. And now we have a pool of young people who intern with us who we can pull back from in the future. So the tips are just, in our case, community organizations again. I know that's going back to our first question, but it's really important. I mean, we have wonderful pillars in the community as well, because those are who we pull on to interview. We had a small business crisis due to COVID. So our young people were able to reach out to the community and ask them. Sometimes resources are found that way. but it also helps engagement and a great social aspect. So I utilize what is around me in a positive manner.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for folks on the call, like what I did was I basically took the strategies that Laverne shared with me, as well as some of my own personal experience in doing some of this work, and I just codified it. So, Laverne mentioned like information that she would have wished she would have known beforehand. So definitely, how are you leveraging your employer orientation? Consider, like Laverne mentioned, like being able to share a snapshot of your students, the benefits and the assets of multilingualism and multiculturalism by indicating the long-term benefits, especially with those employers who are like, I'm not sure if I want to work with these students. But if you're like, oh wait, but this can help with your diversifying your market or long-term with your business plans, like employers will rethink that, right? Also thinking about sharing students' learning styles and also some of the projects for students to engage in, like some of the ideas that Laverne mentioned today, and ways to uplift the multilingualism and multiculturalism and language skills in the workplace. So like thinking about, I've seen, there's a colleague who's on the call her and I talked about, one of her schools, the way they use their L's, is like having their L support with translation or like translating information. I use my students with my interns. I literally had them lead a whole entire session in Spanish from beginning to end, right? Because that was the ownership that I wanted them in terms of the project that they were going to be leading. I could have done it in Spanish myself, but I let them do it, right? So just thinking about what are these projects and how are you engaging your students, and how do you jot down some ideas that you can then share with employers to make it a little bit easier for them to think about how to serve the population. Also remind employers that this is students' first real job experience and that they should be prepared to exhibit patience and be prepared to answer any clarifying questions. Remind the workplace partner of when they had their first job and how the experience shaped them into the professional they are today, right? Because I remember my first job. I think everyone can sort of relate to that experience. And sometimes it's needing to get the employer and the student to see eye to eye and realize that they should be learning from one another, which I know Laverne also uplifted in like saying that she learned from the students learn from her. And that creates a culture of like being seen, heard, and valued. So how can like employer partners infuse some of these things? And then just amplifying students' eagerness and excitement to work in this particular industry, in this particular sector, with this particular company, and then highlight the gifts and the beauties of being multilingual and multiculturalism, and thinking about exactly the other aspects that were mentioned. And then last part is thinking about matching student employers based on linguistic, racial, and cultural diversity. So I actually learned the other day, and I think it's included here, but I learned that Google, for example, has an affinity group. So how can you ask employer partners what type of affinity groups do they have? Actually, it's the next one. Encourage employers to showcase and leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and affinity groups. So like ask them, how can they expose students to these? How can they serve as mentors? How can they support students with some of these things? Leverage students' multilingualism and multiculturalism to uplift student voice in projects and assignments, going back to some of the examples Laverne gave. Support employers in creating scaffolded training plans that leverage students' multi-language skills, and you'll have access to DML's scaffolding, like the cheat sheet that we have. You can feel free to share that with an employer. Like that has some great, quick and easy, like the short and dirty suggestions that they can just grab and pull and keep it moving. And then assisting employers in really creating those structures for the internships to benefit students and employers, and consider, again, the scaffolding approach that Damaris mentioned earlier, such as graphic organizers or note takers to support understanding and access to content, identifying racial, cultural, and linguistic employees who can serve as supervisors or mentors for the students. Sometimes students need to see someone who looks like them. I had someone who the other day, an adult, say to me, oh, I didn't know that males could be nurses. And I'm like, what? Like males could be nurses. So like just some of these ideas of like, unless you're exposed to these things, you're not familiar. So how are we ensuring that our students are exposed to all of these opportunities? And then creating opportunities for both asynchronous learning and synchronous tasks. So like thinking about that research, thinking about that, creating interviews, thinking about what those tasks might look like in order to support student learning. And with that, we're going to transition because I know we have only 15 more minutes and a lot to cover. So we're going to jump into breakout rooms. And again, as I mentioned, this is a working session. So I am going to drop into the chat. However, I want you to reflect on these things. So we're going to be broken up into groups, and each group is going to think about whether you're preparing for students, whether you're preparing employers, what strategies do you currently use? What strategies would you like to use from what you learned today? What strategies are missing? Like, we don't have all the answers here, and this is only an hour workshop and 15 minutes. So what resources do you need to engage in and leverage? What resources do you need? Like, what are missing? What resources are missing from this list that can help you more effectively do your work? So again, the three options, and based on the number of your breakout room, that's the slide that corresponds to you. So it's either going to be preparing for students, preparing employers, and there's two different employer slides. And again, the structure is you'll have the list of strategies that we discussed today and that we shared, as well as what strategies, thinking about what strategies you want to use, what strategies you're currently using, what strategies you feel are missing, resources that you need, and partnerships and resources that are missing. And I want you to think through this, and please, like, as much information as you can share is super helpful, because I am also going to use this information to help support me in creating structures and tools and resources and potential professional developments in the future that can then help you support your students. So again, anything will be really helpful, and I am dropping into the chat the document for you to open. And Larry, you can put us into a breakout room. I was having great conversation and I lost folks. But yeah, just want to finish that. So we were having a conversation, and something that I was going to share and bring up to everyone before I asked folks to share out was that I am going to, so Laverne mentioned that she is an after school program and basically a community-based organization that focuses on media. So that's like industry focused, but yet a CBO. I am going to make sure that I also include, we have a database of CBOs across the city that are culturally and linguistically diverse, that you might be able to tap into those. And if, let's say, for example, the CBO doesn't necessarily have the industry that you might need, if they're in your area, you might be able to build relationships with that community-based organization, and they might have a referral. So think about them as a potential intermediary to help you service the students that you have that you want to really uplift some of their language skills and may not be able to through partnering. Yes, networking, key. So I would love to hear from folks as to kind of what was spoken about in your breakout groups. What are some of the needs or some of the resources? I'm going to share my screen yet one more time, so that way we can revisit what those questions were. And I think we're a small enough group where we can talk out loud. I know we only have 1 minute left, so I would love to hear from like one or two folks. And then if folks have a chance to stay around, we can answer any questions. But definitely thinking about what strategies do you currently use? What strategies would you like to use? Strategies that are missing, resources that you're using, or resources that you feel are missing and you need to best support this population. And anyone can go off mute, drop it into the chat. Would love to hear from the group.
I gotta say, in my group, there was someone named Martinez, sorry, Martinez, but he mentioned really knowing who your students are, right? And knowing what their weaknesses are and how we could support them, right? So it's not just trying to place them, but it's really knowing where they need the help and how we can help them. So I love that strategy, right? Knowing who they are, who we're serving.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let's see. Yep. So someone mentioned to create and develop a list of speaking points. Yes, with employers. I love that idea. match languages of students with workplaces where the same languages are spoken. I love that. Yes, no, please. And again, if you complete the exit survey, you'll have an opportunity to definitely ask for a consultation, and we can do a one-on-one and talk through things. And, you know, what I didn't mention earlier is my position is fairly new. It has never existed before. I haven't even been in role. I've been in my position a year and 2 months. I've been doing this work for a long time, but in role specifically. So I am here to help support. So please take advantage of the exit ticket and reach out to me so that way we can definitely follow up. And if there's anyone else interested in sharing, please feel free to take yourself off mute. If not, I am going to ask that unless folks have questions for Laverne or Damaris, I'm going to pass it back to the CTE team.
Thanks, Yesenia. So first link here on here, please feel free to reach out to Yesenia and her team at dml@schools.nyc.gov. The second link that we have up, I just dropped in the chat, is for our Institute exit survey. So please make sure to fill that out before you guys leave. It is the only way we can make improvements on these sessions. The third link we actually have to our WBL calendar. There is only one more offering for this month. The new calendar will be shared in the upcoming week. And the last link is actually for all of the resources that were provided today by Yesenia. All of those will be made available to everyone at the session today. And you can go to the next slide. Yep. And on behalf of Yesenia, myself, and Takia, we give you back the rest of your afternoon. Have a good afternoon.